in here again.
So they needed the workforce. Yes. So are the laws, in a way, racial laws? It's not racial segregation. What's the future on that then? I mean, is it greater democracy? Yes, I did hear it. Yes. Yes. So it's a move, but it's only a small step. Yes, that's right. Yes. So will those changes make, what sort of difference will they make, do you think?
It would be fantastic to get going. So, welcome to today's session this afternoon on renewing, reinvigorating integrity. This session is called Faming, Not Shaming. So my name, some of you will know me who are students here in the school. I'm Anna Petherick. I'm a lecturer here. And I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Batool and by Blair. So Batool has come all the way from Balochistan in the north of Pakistan, where she is the first assistant commissioner there, first female assistant commissioner. And Blair is the director of an NGO called Accountability Lab that is doing really excellent work in 9 countries. And we have various partnerships going on with one of the school's research programs called the Building Integrity Program. Now, this session is actually structured around 3 themes. So the main one is youth, like the rest of the conference. So in this case, if you think about it, youth, or tapping into youth to mobilize against corruption. But we also want to bring in ideas of integrity and gender because we think these are quite linked. So if you like, we want to explore the idea of how you can mobilize youth to promote or to celebrate praiseworthy behavior among public servants, rather than merely criticize people for doing bad things. And we think gender is really relevant to this, in part because there's an awful lot of research these days that suggests that promoting gender equality is actually really important in eroding corrupt networks and in the kind of norms that perpetuate patronage and various other forms of corrupt practices. And clearly, as we heard in the last session, youthful attitudes towards gender norms are really important there. Now, this panel actually came together because Batool and Blair are already connected. And so I thought that rather than me say more about each of them, I'd hand over to them and you can explain how exactly you are connected and tell us a little bit more about yourselves. Blair, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thank you, Anna, and it's great to be here. About 15 years ago, when I was a young person, I was working for the World Bank, and part of my job was to talk to young people in developing countries about the challenges that they faced. And I was expecting to hear things like, we want better education, we want better healthcare, we want clean drinking water, all things that they definitely needed. But actually what people said to me almost unanimously was, we want more accountability, we want people in power to be less corrupt, we want more justice, because we know that those are really the core problems and they lead to all of these other issues that we face in our lives. And it got me thinking about accountability and began this journey that I'm still on about how to build accountability and how to work with young people in particular to support integrity within systems. So about 8 years ago, set up this organization, the Accountability Lab, having come to that conclusion that accountability is really what it's all about. Unless we can get this relationship between people in power and citizens right, we can't deal with all of these other things. Second of all, that this is going to be a generational project. Accountability is not easy to build. It takes a long time. It's not a linear process. So that's why young people, of course, are so important, because they are going to be leading this change that needs to happen. And third, if it's all about that generational change, it has to be creative. It has to be fun. It has to be driven from the bottom upwards with the good ideas of young people like many of you. So around that time, I was sitting with our team in Nepal, watching Nepali Idol, the version of American Idol or Pop Idol that we have in the UK. And we thought, what if we came up with a TV show that celebrated integrity in this fun, media-savvy way, and we called it Integrity Idol. And the very next day, sent out volunteers to collect nominations from people for honest government officials in their communities. And we got lots of nominations, narrowed it down to the top 5, and then we filmed them and put them on television and asked people to vote for their Integrity Idol. And it was amazing. It created a big national conversation about integrity, about the kind of people that we need in government, and about naming and faming, as we call it, rather than naming and shaming, which is what often happens in conversations around corruption. So this campaign was incredible. We've run it lots of times since then, and I can go into more detail a bit later. But one other country where we have teams that do amazing work is Pakistan. And a couple of years ago, we ran this Integrity Idol campaign, which we've now changed the name to Integrity Icon. And Batool was one of the winners. She was nominated by people in her community, and we celebrated her very publicly. And so I know her through that process.
And tell us about your experience of coming into contact with Accountability Lab.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I will deliberate upon, because since I've been here and I met a few people and they were really baffled with the idea, what does an assistant commissioner do? Why is it so big deal for you? First assistant commissioner, what does it even mean? So I'll come to that later. It's a big deal in Balochistan because Balochistan is one of the 4 provinces of Pakistan, and we are neighbors with Afghanistan, Iran, and Arabian Sea. And if you look at Balochistan, it is 46% of the land mass of Pakistan. So you can imagine. So the major chunk of Pakistan is Balochistan geographically. So we never had an assistant commissioner, female assistant commissioner in Balochistan. Why is it relevant? I'll come to that later. To answer, how did I come to know Blair and Accountability Lab? When I got my first posting as Assistant Commissioner City, so in Quetta, I was all over the social media because back then it was a big deal and people were talking about it, that she's the first female and she's going in the field and working there. So I got a call from the team of Accountability Lab, and They asked a few questions, and they filmed me for 3 minutes. Yeah, and this is how I came to know. So basically, the general public started talking about it, and this is how they picked me up. Yeah.
And could you tell us a bit more about, I guess, the social environment of Balochistan, what it's actually like to live there?
Okay. Balochistan is very tribal in setup. The beauty of Balochistan is diversity. We have so many ethnic groups living together. So it's a mix of people, mix of languages. They're all living together in that landmass. Then we have, we are very naturally, we are rich in resources. We have gold, we have chromite, we have copper, we have oil, we have gas. So it's a rich, rich province. But on the downside of it, it's sparsely populated. It's only 6.8% of the whole population of Pakistan. And we have problems in communication. We don't have good road networks. So the human resource is itself very a challenging thing in Balochistan. So how do public administration work in Balochistan, right? So we in Balochistan, we have divided, divided Balochistan in administrative units. So we have 7 divisions, and each division is headed by a commissioner, responsible for the affairs of the whole division. Each division has districts. It depends. Might be 3 districts, 4 districts, headed by a deputy commissioner, responsible for the affairs of the whole district. And when it goes down, each district has assistant commissioners who are responsible for the subdivision level. So it's an administrative unit. What does an assistant commissioner do? So in Pakistan or in Balochistan, if you face any problem, you go to assistant commissioner's office. So he or she is the missing link. He or she, the officer, coordinates, links the general public with the government. You are basically the face of government. You're the representative of government. And you make sure that the health facilities, health institutions, education, road and networks, everything is working. So you're responsible for lots of things. So it's a serious business. So I guess now you can believe that an assistant commissioner doing so many things in the subdivision. So we never had a female officer in the field, because then you have to go in the field. If there is a land dispute, you have to be personally present. If there is a protest, you have to go and negotiate with the protester. So it's a big deal in Balochistan that if a female comes forward and talks to the mob, and then you have to keep this in mind. It's a very patriarchal society. So the literacy rate is very low. You have very low female to male education ratio. So you have to keep that in mind. So that's why it was a big deal for the public back then, 4 years back, when I joined as assistant commissioner. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So you have natural resources that you dig out the ground. You have fairly low human capacity. You have a pretty much limitless job description.
Yeah.
It does sound like the ultimate civil service challenge. So I wanted to pick up on something you said there. You've been in your job for 4 years.
Yes.
And you seem to have maintained the same motivation and idealism throughout. But is that common for people with your kind of job?
This is natural. Like, even if you're a student here, when you get accepted in Oxford, you all are very excited. When you start being in class, I don't know if you give me this liberty to say it on your behalf. Once your classes start, then you start losing that motivation and you start feeling the burden. So this is same with, and I think it's very natural. So when you start off as an assistant commissioner, okay, and that's a very prestigious thing. CSS is a huge thing in Pakistan. My colleagues from India, they can relate it. So it's a very competitive exam. You go through it, then you have a series of psychological tests, and it's an interview, so it's a big deal. So most of the youngsters, they have this dream of becoming a CSP and clearing this exam. And then you think that all the problems you've been blaming the government for, you believe that once I'm Assistant Commissioner, all the problems will be solved. So I'll be doing that. So the reality, unfortunately, is once you get posting, you come to know there's so many problems. And you don't have, unfortunately, that magic wand. So yes, idealism, it starts getting away. So for me, personally what worked for me, I believe it's very personal. Every individual has its own mechanism of keeping his or her idealism alive. How it works for me, yes, nothing is perfect. The system isn't perfect. It's not perfect in any part of the world. But when I sleep at night, I try to rewind the whole day. And I try to find if I have done something good for any poor person, a person who's without resources, a person who had no politician call on me that please help or assist him or her. So if I've helped any that person, that individual, without any backing or any resources, so that makes me very satisfied. And then I keep reminding myself that in the first place, why did I want to become a civil servant? I have to keep that alive. And I think it's true with every profession. You have to keep your idealism alive because, Batumi, the society is on it. They want to break that idealism. So it's very, very personal. So everybody has its own mechanism. I don't know. I've not come to a complete answer, but it works for me that if I keep reminding myself, why did I apply for a CSS in the first place? If I keep each night reminding myself, have I been helpful to anyone? So it works for me pretty much, yeah.
And I can see in the room some former MPPs and current MPPs. So the former MPPs can tell the current ones how you keep your motivation going throughout the year. So, Blair, you work with civil servants, many different types of civil servants in Pakistan and elsewhere. I wanted to ask you, first of all, whether these kind of boundless job descriptions are quite common, and also whether this narrative arc of, I guess, losing hope as you get older, as you gain more experience and power is quite common.
I think it is common.
Yeah.
Batool talked a bit about the political economy of change, but, and I'm sure many of you experienced this if you've worked in government too, the pressure to participate in systems that are corrupt can be massive for honest people going into public service, not just from within the institution itself, but even from their own family members, from their own communities. It wasn't in Pakistan, but in another country that we work, I was talking to a civil servant who got a big job in government and was saying to me, I'm honest, when I got this job, my community was asking me constantly to give them what they felt they deserved. I was in a position of power. I had access to resources. Why wasn't I giving them this money, stealing the money and giving it to them? He said, I can't do that. I'm a person of integrity. But as a result, I've been ostracized from my community. I literally cannot go home to see my family because I haven't provided what they thought was their due. And I think there's all sorts of different examples of that kind of thing. Lots of social pressures, lots of issues related to norms, which maybe we'll talk about. So it is a big, big problem. But at the same time, there are always incredible people like Batool who are finding ways to buck the system and to push back. When we started Integrity Icon, in many places we heard the common refrain that you're never going to find any honest government officials. They don't exist. And that is absolutely not the case. There are always people doing the right thing. I think we just need to find them and support them. To give you one example of another icon whose story I just love, there's a drugs enforcement agency officer in Liberia who won this campaign in Liberia a few years ago called Alfonso, who earns about $150 a month. Because he's working in drugs enforcement, regularly comes across massive amounts of cash, and of course has never taken any of it. And in one particular incident, he was made aware that the bodyguards of the president of Liberia were smuggling drugs from Sierra Leone back into Liberia in her convoy. So he stopped the convoy, he arrested the bodyguards right in front of her, and put them in jail, and suffered all sorts of consequences as a result, including being demoted. And when I asked him about this, he said, well, I said, why did you do this? And he said, because integrity is everything we have. If we don't have integrity, what else do we have? Just incredible dedication to serving citizens and to being honest and to making public service something that is part of good governance. So I think there are always good people. The key, I think, is to connect them and make this a collective effort. It's very hard for one person to stand up and say, I'm going to be honest in a system in which that's very difficult. But if we have lots of people standing up together, strength in numbers, who can push back and say, we want things to be different, then I think that gives them a sense of solidarity and the sense that they're not alone in all of this. And the way that one person in Pakistan put it to me was, in the same way that criminal networks protect each other, let's create these networks of angels within government that can protect each other and support each other to grow this zone of good governance and integrity.
Mm. And this is actually quite counter-narrative, right? So most civil society organisations that have the same ultimate goal of reducing corruption and improving the quality of the public service take the other routes. They do research, they write reports about how much corruption is going on, whose fault it is, and they publicise it. So what was it that made you pick this alternative route?
I think if we think about the work that exists around corruption, by its nature, anti-corruption work is against something. It's about the problem, not the solution. And I think that's important, of course. Corruption is a bad thing. Laws should be enforced. But I do think there's this other way of looking at it, and there isn't nearly enough attention on the process of celebrating good people, of lifting up role models, and of naming and faming, as I put it, rather than naming and shaming, catching people doing the right thing rather than the wrong thing. I think also traditionally approaches to anti-corruption have been often about compliance and enforcement. Again, rules should be enforced, but there's a big piece that's often missing around values, around ethics, and around norms. We can build institutions and we can create laws, but if they don't correspond to the way that behaviours happen, the way that incentives exist, the relationships within society, then people are just going to work around those laws. So it's a collective action problem, and that gets to how you shift norms. And I think lifting up people like Batool and celebrating good people is one way to begin to encourage integrity as a collective behaviour, as opposed to any other incentives like money.
And I actually think that you two are a fantastic example of a thread that's been running through this conference about insiders and outsiders and a kind of synergistic potential that is there. So I wondered, Batool, if you could talk a little bit about how being involved in Integrity Icon has actually empowered you to achieve what you were hoping to achieve in the civil service.
Well, you all must have heard about John Samwell. He says that misery, like happiness, is contagious. And while my job experience tells me that hope is contagious too, honesty and integrity is contagious too. So our youth, they tend to always highlight the negatives. We are prone to, I don't know, it's human nature. We love to pinpoint the negatives, and we hardly appreciate any good thing. So yes, I agree and I second with what Blair said, that accountability in itself, yes, you need to stop the bad thing that's happening there. You have to highlight the corrupt people and then punish them. But likewise, it's very important to celebrate the people who are trying hard. So in my case, when in 2000, 4 years back, when I got this posting, there were no female assistant commissioners. Today, as I talk, in Balochistan, we have 11 assistant commissioners in field. So it says, it's an evidence, it says that once you get celebrated, like from the platforms, like Integrity Idol or Icon, women or the other people, they start loving this idea that, okay, civil servant is not always corrupt. A civil servant can do a lot of things. So the idea is basically to always, and I believe this is mind sciences, like you think positive, you do positive, and ultimately it spreads all around you. So yeah, now we have female assistant commissioner, now it's no big deal. I'm very happy about it. And frankly speaking, at times I felt very offended that people meeting me, oh, you are the first female assistant commissioner. I didn't like it personally. I believe it's no big deal. A civil servant or politician has nothing to do with gender, I guess. You're an officer, you have your work, you just do it. Why is it so big deal that, and why still we talking about these gender issues? It upsets me. We should talk about development, we talk about sustainable development. We're not talking about this. So I am very, very, I'm very happy that Balochistan is now past that phase. So being female is not the only attribute you have. Yeah, so I'm happy.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Has, beyond encouraging other women in particular to go into public service, do you feel like it gave you any trust and credibility within your team yourself to do more of what you do, or did it help you actually push for reforms?
Yes, naturally. You feel an obligation. You feel an obligation for the generation that's coming. You feel an obligation for all the women who are sitting inside their homes. You feel an obligation against those women who are being targeted by patriarchal mindset. So yes, it keeps you motivating, and I don't know whether you like it or not, you're in a position to mentor others and to set a good example, and that's very good for integrity as well. Like we talked about corruption, this pressure of always to be on the right path, it's good. At times, if you want to fumble, it keeps a check on you. So yes, it's good to like being and this is the byproduct of not only appreciating integrity, it's also putting a pressure on the person also to always live up to that mark. So yeah.
I'm going to follow up on a follow-up question and ask you actually whether being a finalist and winning actually helped you in the field when you were doing your job. Did it give you more respect?
Yes, yes. It has. And as I said, that people believe since once you're recognized, so your seniors or the people or your colleague, they will never think otherwise of you. They think, okay, give her this assignment because she's known to do it correctly. Okay, so yes, this whole competition thing has put a pressure on me, and it has helped me, yes, to gain the confidence and appreciation of my seniors and my colleagues, yeah.
Fantastic. So that's the insider being helped by the outsider, but as the outsider, so I know you do a lot of work upskilling people in civil services, and you're going to work with the Pakistani civil service soon. So you can tell us a bit more about how you do that and how you leverage off this insider-outsider relationship to achieve integrity.
After we started Integrity Icon, there's been a number of different kind of channels of work that have split off from the core of it. Because after talking to people like Batool, we realized what incredible role models they are and how closely they needed to be linked to people coming into civil service to ensure that this mentorship and this inspiration occurred. So there's a lot of that kind of thing going on where we're linking existing icons with other people coming into government. That then led to a whole series of work with some of the civil service training schools in different countries around their curriculum, what they're teaching about integrity and accountability. So in Pakistan, for example, we've just started working with the Civil Service Academy to completely reorient the way that they are teaching incoming civil servants, which traditionally was quite old school, quite based on the idea of an expert that would lecture. And we're sort of flipping that and now looking really at problem solving, making it very citizen-centric, using human-centered design type thinking over a much longer period with the students. So it's not just a few lectures where they're told not to be corrupt. It's much more about training them for the challenges that they will face when they come into to government. So I think there's a lot that can be done in that respect. And then the third thing is the way that the icons are coming together into coalitions. I mentioned, of course, that collectively strength in numbers is a good thing, and they've begun to create sort of sub-icon groups looking either at sectors. So there's a number, for example, that come from healthcare that are now looking at integrity within healthcare systems, or by gender. This will lead us perhaps into a really interesting debate later about gender and corruption. But the first time we ran this campaign in Nigeria, 4 of the top 5 were ladies, and we had a big public celebration, and we had a number of very prominent female anti-corruption activists from Nigeria there as well. And they created a network of women now within public service in Nigeria who are really pushing for the kind of change that they want to see, and thinking about the kind of pressures or incentives that women face as opposed to men as they're trying to build integrity within bureaucratic systems.
And I imagine that this kind of forming these links between insiders and outsiders is actually really important when we think about youth movements against corruption, because it might be one thing to mobilize young people, but if young people don't have the connections and the networks to people in power, it's very easy for the old guard to re-establish the systems that were there before. So is that something that you're working on as well?
Yes, we're thinking about it very much, absolutely, and we see many of these movements even right now. Corruption is at the very core of them. These movements are often quite flat, horizontal in terms of management, and that's good when you're trying to stay safe and avoid the authorities. But there comes a point, I think, where there needs to be negotiations and a reform agenda, and there needs to be people both outside and inside who can talk about that. And existing kleptocratic regimes and corrupt networks are very flexible, and they will adapt. They will often take a hit. Someone will be deposed, for example, and then they will reconvene and try and push back to re-establish all of these networks and protect their own interests. So building these coalitions inside and outside the system with reformers inside who really can think in the right ways and who can push for the kind of change that's needed is absolutely critical.
Fantastic. Well, we've been talking for about half an hour, and I imagine there are lots of questions in the room. So I'm going to take about 3 or 4, and as in the other sessions, if you could just say who you are and phrase your question or point as succinctly as you can possibly do, that would be fantastic.
Congratulations, Batool. Fantastic. Just one request to you. My name is Kanta Singh, and I'm a fellow at St. Cross College. I'm a Chevening Gurukul fellow from India. I think it's very important to continue talking about gender. It's not only for yourself, but people who are following you, particularly young girls. So don't think the fight is over. We have to continue doing it. It's sad that when we say officer, and we have to put honest, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the height of sadness to my heart, at least. An officer is supposed to be honest, and an officer is supposed to be doing the work. We need not celebrate an officer for doing the work, right? So what you're doing is doing your work, but you're doing it well. And in our part of the world, we know how things are. That's how we need more people like you. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
You want to take some questions?
Do you have any other questions at this point?
There's one here.
One down here.
Hi, thank you. Batool, I'm Rita from Indonesia. So previously, before studying here at the Blavatnik, I work at the Parliament, Indonesian House of Representatives, as an advisor in anti-corruption issue. And my question will be about the decentralization process that's now being implemented in Indonesia. So Actually, decentralization is part of our democratic transition process after we enter this reformation era, after the Suharto era. And the problem is that after we implement this decentralization, the corruption somehow has shifted to the local government. So, and you as a part of local government, I just want to ask, is there any advice on how to somehow change the mindset of these local officials, how to, I don't know, maybe get them to be more, to feel more appreciated, and what kind of incentive or other thing that can make them to be more proactive in fighting corruption and doing this bureaucratic reform. So thank you so much.
Do you want to take that question now?
Yes. Yes, a very good comment. I believe that you get paid, a civil servant is paid to do a job, and of course do it correctly, for God's sakes. You're not given your salary is not there just because you're an officer. You have to do, and you have to ensure that you are delivering service to the people and to their utmost satisfaction. Unfortunately, yes, in order to motivate other officers, you have to celebrate. You have to say, yes, he's an honest officer, let's celebrate. So it becomes a motivation for others. But sadly, I hope one day we'll get to that level of moral and ethical ground, very ideal, but we keep pushing to that point. As far as digitalization is concerned, yes, I personally believe that in first world countries, most of the governance is e-governance. Everything is digital. And you find hardly any space for any human intervention. So when you get things done manually, there are more chances of corruption. But your question, how to mitigate them, how to motivate them, I believe it's carrot and stick, the old and ancient way. We are humans, we will err, and then there would be humans who will be saints, and we will have devils, and we'll fight, and this is how life is about. So you have to choose your battles, and then you have to choose your team. It's as simple as that. And I don't think if there are two human beings in a room, they will always have some issues, because we're human beings. We have our own individual aspirations and dreams. So carrot and stick, yes, appreciate them. If they're not doing it, if they're corrupt, I believe you need to punish them. Yeah, so
integrity as well as minimum standards with some kicks up the bum.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to pick up a bit more about the idea of our gender issues over, because I know that you did face an awful lot of issues to do with being the first female assistant commissioner, and I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about them and how you overcame them.
So the funny part is we get through the same examination system as any male officer. We pass all the criteria, and yet each day, we females, we have to prove ourselves. And we have to prove that, yes, we deserve this job. I deserve this posting. Each day. And it's very hard. It's very hard. And hardly, I don't want to make a sweeping remark regarding my male colleagues, but they don't know this pain. We females, we've been through this. Each day we fight this. It's not only assistant commissioner or civil servant. As any capacity, you are doing any sort of job in any office, you have to fight this. And whenever you are given an assignment, I don't know, you feel as if you're being given a favor. We've given you a favor. Please do this assignment. Yes. and you feel this. Now, and I face this. Yes, but I have to balance it off. Today I'm here because of lots of, I just want to name all of them. My good friends, colleagues, my husband, my father, I'm sitting here. So yes, we have good men. We have men who understand that women, apart from being female, she's a human being, she has potentials and talents, and they give you that energy. So you get always that energy from the colleagues who are always with you, your father, your husband, your brother, your son. So on the other hand, when you go and meet other people, yes, they are there. And then you face this challenge. As an officer, at times, you have to take very, very strict actions. So the problem with an officer is, if you are lenient with the people, they'll say, she's very unlike officer. She's very soft. And if you take strict action, I don't want to use the word, they will use the word B, she's such a B, okay? Because you're doing it right. Because otherwise, in that same scenario, a male officer would have done the same thing. He would have taken the same strict action. But since you're female, if you do that, yeah, you get criticism. So, but the bright side is, it's our own fault also. Back in Pakistan, or if I talk about my province, I keep telling the young girls, please come forward, go and work in offices, be an officer, be a lecturer, be a doctor, be whatever you want. Just do something. Just don't be at home. Just do something, because men are not used to seeing women in power positions. Men are not used to seeing women in workplaces. So it's not men's fault also. So we need to give them that space. They are not used to us. So once they are used to us, maybe one day, they will start giving us due regard. So yes, I had so many challenges in that. And I worked a lot. At times, you get comments like, you're a very famous officer because you're a female. Like, what sort of a remark is that? I'm a female, so no, I am. People appreciate me because I work very hard. I've worked for this. I've studied hard. I've worked for this place. I've worked in a hard area which most of the male colleagues would never come to. They would never get posted in areas. So we have to, but we shouldn't be taken back. We shouldn't be discouraged. It gives me motivation. It gives me motivation that we have to do a lot for all the girls so that men start behaving. Yeah.
I appreciate the well-behaved men. Actually, I should say that Batool came top in the civil service entrance exams for your province.
For Balochistan,
You talked a little bit before about digitalisation as a solution to local government corruption.
Yes.
And I know that some of the things you've had to work with is corruption in land, and there's a very much a gendered component to corruption in land in many parts of the world. Could you explain that a bit to us?
So in Pakistan, we've started, the e-governance is a thing, and the government has started working on it. One of the good, because I would like to share an example that it's a tribal setup, and most of the times the female heir are not given their due share in property. So with the government of Imran Khan, now we have Pakistan Citizen Portal. It's an app. If you have any complaints regarding anything, you take a video, you can make a video or take a picture, upload it, and each officer, if officer is in charge of that problem, the app is managed in a way that you are forced to attend to that problem. So we do get these complaints of land where female heir are not given their due share. And fortunately, most of the problems are being solved. So it's a very good example of how e-governance or digitalization is helping not only the general masses, women, because their voices are being heard. It's because they cannot go to offices, so with an app, they can register a complaint. So yes, things are getting good, yes.
And I guess there's probably a youth element to how news about the app is spreading, right?
Yes, most of the users of this app are youth. Yeah. And they help even the older citizens, and they help them understand how this app works. So the good thing is, whenever I talk about, with my colleagues, even whenever we talk about service delivery, mostly we believe, an officer believes that I've done you, like if you wanted a service delivery, I've done my job, but they will never ask for a feedback. Feedback from the public is very important. So it's like someone orders apple and then you deliver them oranges. You have delivered them some fruit, but it's not apple. So it's not, the customer is not happy. Your government pays you your salary because you need to work according to up to the satisfaction of the public. So what this app has done, that if I have solved a complaint, against each resolved complaint, a feedback is generated. If the public and a complainant is not happy, it's regenerated. And then you get, it blinks red on the dashboard. And you then get asked by your seniors. So I love this framework because most of our officers, we don't take care of the feedback. And it's missing. It's missing in our system. The feedback is very important. Yeah.
So it helps people with lower power in society not be ignored.
Yes.
Yeah. And I know, Blair, you have quite a lot of expertise in working in different countries. You've seen different attempts at digital solutions to fighting corruption. What's your experience in this, and what do you think about the main points that Batool was making?
I think the feedback point is really, really important.
Yeah.
A lot of what passes for citizen engagement generally, and often with technology specifically, is actually really information extraction. It's not feedback loops. It's not taking information, using it to make decisions, and then communicating those decisions back to communities. It's taking the information, possibly using it to make a decision, and then never talking to the community again. So we're now working at the local level in many places around how to build these feedback loops around critical issues, whether it's concession agreements with mining companies, for example, or public service delivery. So that's really key. I actually had a question for Batool, which is about the political will related to technology, because I think the civic engagement landscape is littered with civic technology tools that no one has ever really used. I think because it can often be quite supply-driven. People that know these tools think, great, we're going to come up with a tool, and suddenly everyone's going to use it to fix problems. And they might report about problems, but if there's no will to fix the problems, then very little happens, and it can actually be damaging in that it raises expectations without meeting them. The Citizen Portal in Pakistan is based, or is an initiative of the Prime Minister, and it's in his office. Yes. Is that why it works? Is it because everyone knows at every level that this is coming right from the top?
Yes, and political will is very important. Civil servants, they get the direction of their work from the government, from the head of the state. So if he prioritizes something, so it's priority for us. So Citizen Portal is a successful model because the head of the state himself is monitoring it. And I hope that some sort of a sustainable mechanism evolves that and it's an ideal thing, that it shouldn't matter who's sitting at the helm of affairs. It should just run, and it shouldn't matter which political party is in power. It should just run, because service delivery is the ultimate goal. Yeah.
Yeah.
And certainly, I recognise what Batool's explaining about land and gender and corruption from other parts of the world that I've studied, and this is a recurring theme, particularly where you have pluralistic legal systems, and corrupt actors know how to navigate between them, so that essentially they can advantage themselves over people with less power. So, for example, in Ghana, in the northern parts of Ghana, you see widows, and under traditional legal arrangements, they would inherit a small part of the land, even if they didn't marry within their husband's family. And this is because a traditional sort of arbiter would award them this land. But often these days, in the last few years, you've seen a lot of the husband's family selling to business people who then go and register the land under national law. And at this point, the traditional arbiters have no power, and often the widows get left with nothing. And there's NGOs working in Ghana, I know, who have been using participatory videos, so getting young people literally from those communities to pass around mobile phones and having people just make videos and upload them onto YouTube to sort of give voice to this problem and force the government to address it a bit more. Yeah. So I imagine, I can see hands going up everywhere. So let's have another quick round of questions. There's a very eager hand over there.
Thank you. My name is Kogila. I'm from the University of Warwick. In my previous life, I was the Undersecretary for Defence Industry with the Malaysian government. So I can relate to you, Batool, exactly what you're saying. I was a woman. I got appointed at the age of 36, ethnic minority. It was really, really hard. So I can relate 100% to what you say. While I was serving for 20 over years, one of the most difficult questions that I had was keeping to integrity and constantly, continuously questioning myself, am I providing the right leadership to my young officers? Because in the civil service, as you know, in the developing part of the world, sometimes you are in or you're out. Yeah. It's very difficult to stay in between. So if I am going to have the high level of integrity, how am I going to constantly provide that leadership? So my question to you, have you gone through this in your own experience? And the second question is, have you thought about developing a network for yourself? Because developing a network of people that you can rely on, whether in or out, is absolutely crucial, especially if you're a woman. I mean, I'm not being gender biased, but I think that's important. That's the question. Thank you.
My name is Waqar Ali Khan. I'm from the Pakistan Administrative Service. I'm also an assistant commissioner, but I'm serving in a very far better area than you. I'm serving in Islamabad, and I can totally relate how difficult it is to work in Balochistan. Yeah. And many of the officers would never want to go there because of the difficult terrain, the strict patriarchal structure which we have, and a lot of other issues. My question is with regards to what is happening in the country at present. Considering the political situation of the country where this present regime has put the two heads of the previous regimes behind bars on charges of corruption, while a major portion of which is yet to be proved, there are certain who think it is a political victimization. There are others who think it's corruption. Now, in all that debacle, the bureaucracy has stopped working because they fear with the next incoming regime, they might be targeted and victimized in the same manner. So as a civil servant, how do you handle those pressures when they come directly from a political boss? Because ultimately that political person is a representative of the people. He has a stay there. You cannot just shun him straight away by saying, I can't do it. So how did you handle those pressures when you were serving there? And how do you see the present political situation of the country? Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to answer those two questions, and then we'll take
So the answer to Waqar's question is, as Kokilaya, she started off with saying that, and this is very true with us also, either you are in the system or out. So from those people who are from the Asian part of the world, they would understand it. What does this in and out mean? At times you get good postings. At times, you don't. Well, I believe there are no good postings and bad postings. Yes, that's a rhetoric. But now, how do you persist, or how do you respond to the pressures? And you believe that if you do a particular thing and some political bosses are adamant and they are pressurizing. So how do you respond? It's very simple. So why, again, I keep reminding myself, why am I here in the first place? If I'm here in the first place for my own gains, I will sign it off. And I will just pray that I might be spared. And if I am here for the service delivery, I'll say no problem. I'll rather bear the brunt of the system, and I'll be sidelined for few. See, the power of civil servant is you might not get a good posting for 3 years, for 4 years, for 5 years, but you are there. You'll get it. Ultimately, you'll get there. So you shouldn't be very eager. But having said that, recently, National School of Public Policy has generated a report by the senior bureaucrats have written it, and they have suggested remedies, how to fix corrupt officers and not to intimidate others. So it's a challenge. So the good thing is the reforms are coming. Officers are talking about it. The government is very serious about it. So things are there. So the question about mentoring or having my own group, the beauty about, I think, most of the things, they happen to you naturally. So it's like magnet. If you are a positive person, positive people will surround you. If you're a negative person, people like you corrupt, so you'll have some friends. So you know a person is known by the company he keeps. So if you are an outgoing officer, not only officer, as a person also, you'll always get surrounded by good people. So you need not to make a deliberate effort to make a circle, to have a team. No, it comes naturally. And let me tell you one thing. I don't say that I'm a very senior officer. It's just been few initial years. But what I've learned that whenever I do something with my heart, it never fires back. Never. If you do it because of an eyewash or you just want to show it off, people will understand. And today, in today's electronic media, you cannot cover it up. People will know ultimately. So yes, you will start. If you start doing the hard work, you will have hardworking friends. And yes, you'll get the support. Yeah.
We don't have any burning questions right now. I actually wanted to insert a little bit of potentially skepticism, if possible. So I was actually wondering whether the approach of faming people resonates differently in different places that you work, whether it always works out.
Generally, I think it does. There's a lot of practice that we've seen in our own work and that of others, and academically, this idea of reinforcement theory, that if you reward people for doing the right thing, it leads to more good behavior. It works. There's a lot of literature around this idea of positive deviancy and understanding how and why people do things differently in a positive way and how to support that. All of this reinforces this idea. It seems to have worked in Pakistan, but there are places and moments where it hasn't worked quite as well. I think one of the great things about Integrity Icon is it makes these conversations about corruption much more politically feasible, because you can have some of the same conversations without pointing fingers and without calling people out, and that is easier. However, you're still pointing to people who are doing good things in a place where that can be perceived as even implicitly criticizing people who aren't doing good things, certainly people that are close to them. And I'd be interested to hear whether Batool has had this happen to her, but in the offices of some of the people that we've celebrated, there's often jealousy, what could be called the kind of crabs in a bucket syndrome, where if one person is rising up, people begin to try and pull them down for lots of reasons. We've seen bosses of some of the winners feel like they should have had more credit for their success. So we're doing a lot now to turn this individual integrity into a celebration of collective integrity and try and make sure that people around the icons buy into it to support it over time. For example, we're now doing retreats with the teams of the winners, not just with the winners themselves, so that they all sort of buy into this. And even if we can create a small team within an institution that's all pushing in the same direction for integrity, then we can begin to make that shift. But then there are cultural factors and factors related to specific societies as well. And Pakistan is an example where we found an amazing young woman a few years ago to be one of the winners. She comes from a conservative part of the country, and she declined to be part of the campaign. And I don't know exactly why. I think Batool could probably talk more about that. But she didn't want to be on film, and she didn't want to be famed publicly. I don't think because it was about integrity, but it was more to do with the role of women and how she felt about that process.
Do you want to come in on that and perhaps explain?
Well, what I've experienced that most of the women, they don't love to be discussed in social media or be filmed, even in their professional capacity. And that's because, again, I'll reiterate it, we have very few females who are doing their work and they're being highlighted in social media, they're being talked about. There are very few. So men, in general, not to be offensive to men in general, then they do not know how to respond. So mostly they are used to commenting and watching women as celebrities. You're either a singer or an actress, or you're in social media. But when it comes to professional women, I believe that men has to learn how to comment. So most of my colleagues, I can safely comment on their behalf. They don't want to become, they don't want their stories be discussed in social media because they shy away, because then people will start commenting on them, which might offend the male members of the family. Again, if we shy, see, it's a battle. We all women, we have to face this battle. If today I am not going to talk openly about this, if I ask Blair not to put my video on the social media because might be there people around who might not, they might have bad things to say about me. If I don't do it today, my daughter or the girls who are not born yet, or the girls who will come forward, they will face it. So I should face it while I can. Why should I shift this burden to the next generation? So few females, we have to bear this burden. So it's okay. And I believe it will take time. Like forums like this would help female officers to come forward and be open to Blair even that, yes, we are ready to compete in this integrity idol. So we have to come forward. Ultimately, the Facebook warriors, the keyboard warriors, they will learn how to comment. Yeah, we just give them that space. It's okay.
And is this something that you're learning from in the organisation, that you have different people with different profiles and perhaps resonating very differently? And I imagine this is actually where young people involved in each of the countries you're working in can actually tell you a lot about how it works in their country and how to help your icons through the process, right?
Absolutely, and we're getting better and better, I hope, at supporting them to do all of the amazing work that they need to do. And I know we're running out of time, but just wanted to reiterate my incredible respect for what Batool is doing. I mean, she is in such a difficult part of the world doing such incredible work to lift up women and to improve integrity. It's just incredible.
Yeah, thank you. And I will just add to that before we go out and go and get some coffee, but Batool's come all the way from Balochistan, having never been to England before, and I'm so grateful that she made the trip.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for telling us about it. Oh, so after coffee, I know it's Friday afternoon and we have rugby tomorrow, but nonetheless, it's not time to go to the pub. There are 2 more sessions, parallel sessions at 4 o'clock. One is about cultural change and identity, and the other one is about Kabul. Again, identity, legitimacy, and governance. So please do stay.